Hey folks, it actually feels like the first day of fall, autumn today. Nice and rainy and cold, just how I like it. I grew up in the rain, so it doesn't bother me, but everyone else around my area is lamenting the end of summer and the heat. Not me. Although, I have to say, and you probably hear it, I am suffering from seasonal allergies, which are quite bad this time of year. This year's been terrible, so I apologize if that's coming through the mic. What I wanted to talk about today is something that I run into quite a bit when surfing guitar sites or forums, and I'm sure you have too, and maybe you've used some of these expressions. One is people talking about gas, G.A.S. Obviously, I hope they're not talking about gas issues health-wise. That would be weird. They're talking about guitar acquisition syndrome, and that's the acronym given to it. I don't tend to use it because I think it's rather silly, but I have noted that other people like to use that expression. And it's something that we all have, and people who regularly watch my videos probably have it too, I would imagine. Or else why would you be watching these videos about all these instruments, is one in question. What makes guitar players also guitar collectors, impulsive buyers of guitars? I mean, I have actually run into sensible people who have an acoustic, an electric, and a classical, and that's it. They're done. I had somebody come over to buy a ukulele the other day and started looking at my guitars. And after about 5 minutes, I figured that they were just curious. They weren't actually looking. And it turns out they have all the guitars they need. They don't need any more. Now that's rare. Most of us are always open to or suspect to temptation. Some of us can't resist when something like this comes on Amazon for $200 and less, giving it a go. So, if we have a bit of expendable income, or even if we don't, if we just have a credit card, a lot of us will buy said temptation, try it out, and then compare it to the rest of what we've got. Some of us will buy this stuff even though we can't afford it, promising ourselves that we'll get rid of something else to pay for it. And this is what's known in and around guitar circles as, quote, thinning the herd. Now, I think that people acquire lots of guitars and eventually realize, or their partner or spouse or roommate gently tells them, you've got too much, it's taking too much space. So they realize they've got to get rid of a few. So there are people that acquire guitars and eventually get to the point where they have to get rid of some. I would say most of us, though, don't really thin the herd. We recycle or cycle through the herd, and this is what I do. For instance, I have a room full of guitars behind me. My rule of thumb is I can't keep guitars that don't fit in here. That's how I keep things sane. My sale guitars are in another area. I have a front room that you've seen on some videos full of display guitars, and I also have a full walk-in closet full of other guitars that I'm going to sell, or that are higher end guitars that I'm selling I don't want sitting out in the front room. If they can't fit in here around me, they can't stay. If I absolutely want to keep it, then something else has to go to make room for it. That's how I keep things sane in my house. That's how I keep my partner happy. Although I must tell you that unlike a lot of guys, and I have a lot of blokes that come here to buy guitars that talk about nagging wives and spouses, how they just can't buy anymore, or they've got to stop, or they've got to get rid of some. I'll be honest, mine never nags me because she knows that it pays the bills. So I don't get any pressure from that aspect, but although I don't want to fill every room of the house full of instruments, I'm conscious of keeping it to a couple of areas so that you don't go to sit on a couch or lie on a bed and there's a guitar there or a cello there or something like that. So I have to do this cycling in, cycling out thing as well. And I'm sure that some of you do it also. How does one do it? Well, it's a very, very difficult and painful process. I have a number of cellos behind me. I keep only 3. I have probably 4 or 5 electric guitars. Actually, a little bit more. A couple are going to have to go, and that's going to involve a decision. At the moment, I have 3 archtop guitars. I really don't need to keep that, but I'm having trouble coming to a decision over getting rid of one, and they're all very, very different. So that may be an area to visit. I used to try to collect one of everything, so I'd have a banjo, a mandolin. I don't do that anymore. I like to use lots of instruments in my recordings, but it's not practical and it's a bit greedy. So I made a decision that banjos and mandolins are one group, and I can keep one. So I no longer have a banjo and a mandolin. I just have my octave mandolin, and that sort of suffices. For some reason, I can play and figure out how to play a lot of musical instruments, but the banjo has always kind of foiled me, so I've let go of that. I do have a couple of hammered dulcimers, which I really like. One's a full hammered dulcimer, a 15-16 dulcimer, and the other one's a small Persian santur. Very, very different. Sounds different, different string, different woods. So I keep both of those. Then I have a few classical guitars, because I play classical guitar a lot, and I try to justify it by type. In other words, I have a couple of vintage. I got a Martin and a Taylor. The Taylor I restored from being run over from a car, so it's kind of got nostalgic value to me. And then I have a flamenco, a regular classical, and an electric classical. I only keep one bass. Actually, that's wrong. I keep one regular bass and one fretless bass. My problem area, though, is acoustic guitars. I have probably too many, and I've just made some difficult decisions and weeded out 2 or 3 and put them up for sale. I did have a couple of 12 strings and decided I can't really keep. There's no point keeping 2 12 strings, so I sold a couple of 12 strings and now just have one. But these are the kinds of decisions I'm sure that you're aware of. It's somewhere between being a fetishist and being a collector and being a serious musician and being selfish. It's a mix of those 4 things in different proportions. Now, for a lot of us, we use the guitars, and that to me is justification for having them. Some of us collect and don't use them all, and perhaps that's getting a bit greedy and a bit fetishist, if you like. I try to justify what stays here. I have one double bass as well that has to exist in a different place now because it's so huge. But I do use it, and I have used it in recordings, so I justify keeping that. Even the cellos behind me that you see, one's electric, one's a carved European-made cello, and the other one's a plywood cello that I can take out and play gigs and things like that. So there's a practical reason for what you keep. I won't even get into my ukuleles. I've done really well to have only 5 or 6 in my personal collection, and that includes concerts, tenors, sopranos, a banjolele, and an electric uke as well. So they're different types, but I'll get a guitar and I'll say, oh, I've got to keep this, but something's got to go to make room for it. So the way I deal with things is cycling. I cycle stuff in, cycle stuff out. It's got to fit in here. This is the studio/study. I use it for various purposes, and I don't want this spilling all over the house. So whatever I'm keeping has to stay in here. There has to be room for it. It's a bit crowded, but it's systematized, and so far nothing's spilling out. I do have a couple of decisions to make. So yes, I have guitar acquisition syndrome, if you want to call it that, but it supplements my income. It's one of my sources of income. So I have reason for acquiring guitars. I also fix up and sell guitars. So I think perhaps there's more justification for me to acquire a guitar than just somebody who sees a guitar and thinks, oh, I don't have anything quite like that, I'm going to add it to my arsenal. Anyway, that's how I justify it. Painful decisions every month for me. I just sold a guitar I never thought I'd sell. But I got a better 12 string and decided to move it on, and a kid came over and fell in love with it, so I'm happy to see him walk away with it. I'm pleased, I'm encouraged he's going to play it, and it will have a good life, and it will be treasured by someone. That always helps. But anyway, what about your practices? I know that a number of you that chime in the comments are not one guitar guys, and some of you acquire guitars to purposefully resell. Some of you acquire them to try them for a while and make a decision on them, and perhaps get rid of something to make room for it. I think that's a common practice. And some of you just are impulse buyers that just build up a collection and then suddenly look around and go, oh shit, I better move on. Or somebody else tells you, look, this is getting too much. Or you're spending too much of our family budget on your electric guitar collection. Which is it for you? I'm curious, but it's interesting that we've developed a whole glossolalia, or language, a glossary around guitar collecting. Guitarists use words like arsenal and axe and G.A.S. and thinning the herd, sayings like that. It's funny that there's almost a sort of language that's sprung up around our types of people. So I'm curious to see what the case is in your particular experience and how you deal with it. So please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.